So, welcome to the second episode of the Compass to Careers podcast. Obviously, with myself, Reece Thomas, electrical engineer. Got Josh Bradshaw, who is an electrical engineer apprentice. We've got Khaled, who's a chemical engineer in training, as we call him, as he's in uni. And then our guest for today is Mr. Will Savage, who is a current chemical engineer. And so I'll give him a bit of a sec to talk about what he does, what he's going into, and I'll let you take the stage, Will.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Great to meet all of you. I'm looking forward to our discussion. So chemical engineers, studied at the same uni as Khaled, Swansea, best engineer, best, fat boy. Give them. Just say, oh, it's the best sort of engineering.
Yeah.
What's this?
Best place for engineering, because that's where I did it as well. Swansea University for the win, apparently.
University in Wales is what I was getting at. Right, carry it on. Yeah, however, mining consultancy as a project engineer, he worked for 2 years. And yeah, we're going to dive into some lessons today.
Yeah, so obviously today's topic is going to be on chemical engineering, so if that's something you're interested in, this will be the one for you. Obviously, we've done a little bit of promotion, but hopefully the stuff that we cover in this will be useful to everyone, not just chemical engineers. Obviously, these guys already know, so one thing that's coming out now is the engineer CV document. Obviously, it's still in checking, so it'll be with you as soon as. And obviously, so I'll let Will talk a little bit about his own personal journey. Obviously, the big question is, why did you choose chemical engineering, and then what made you go into mining?
Yeah. Have any of you boys seen Deepwater Horizon?
Yeah,
I think I have.
Yeah.
I think I have, actually. Oh, it's an awesome film about the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, and I watched it probably when I was 16 or 15. And while everything was blowing up and it was a big disaster, I actually thought, well, where are they? In the middle of the ocean, pumping oil up, and I thought that's pretty cool. So, what do you need to do to get on a rig like that? Well, if you want to be running it, you got to do chemical engineering, and that was the path I pursued. And graduated from Swansea in 2023. I just did the bachelor's in chemical engineering. No year in industry, which is also an interesting point to touch on, because I did feel like I missed out on that experience. But then by the time I came to conclude my degree, there was a bit of a shift, or at least in my mind, I thought oil and gas was shrinking. That's not exactly true, because it's a massive industry and it's not going to disappear even over the next 20 years. And of course, we need oil for many things. But there was a new industry booming, which is net zero. And I chose to enter that is emerging, and try and solve some of the challenges that comes with a new emerging industry.
So did you regret the choice, not going gas?
No, not really. It was quite funny, actually, how I ended up during my role, because I'm at the same company that I joined 2.5 years ago, and I was actually on holiday, and I'd done the interview about 2 weeks before, and then I'd spent the rest of the time on holidays enjoying myself. And then I was getting a few phone calls by the pool, and they were chasing me up to see if I wanted to accept the job. And I hadn't really been checking my emails, so I was quite pleased. I did accept the job, and it was a great opportunity. I mean, so my role when I joined was as a graduate research engineer, and I joined to work specifically on an EU Horizon funded project called CSync, which is all about CDR, which is carbon dioxide removal, using different nature-based and engineered solutions.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big question is then, so obviously you finish uni, and then how did you go about finding this company or making the decision to apply for these roles? Because obviously, as we know, there's a lot of roles out there, but it's actually finding the best place to find the opportunities themselves rather than just saying, oh, I applied to.
Yeah, definitely. And this role came up to me through actually the employability team in Swansea.
Oh, right.
I think it's quite unique, but often it's overlooked, and you should definitely, I was applying to all of those jobs that came through the employability. This one stood out to me because it was actually in mining, which we can chat about a bit more. But yeah, I found the job through the employability team. I had the CV. I was probably slightly fortunate. but I do think I structured it in the right way from the start. I didn't have much engineering experience, but what I did rely on was the pilot labs that we used to do in Swansea. It was a lot of that. And sometimes they're tough because they're Thursday mornings. And if you're in uni, Wednesday, it's the big night out. Especially for me, I was social sec of rugby in my final year. So we used to party quite a lot. And I remember turned up to the labs one morning and they had these distillation columns. And that's great. That's cool. Enjoying working on them. And then I don't know whether the lecturer could tell I was a bit hungover, but he got a bit of the bottom product right out and he went, yeah, so you're purifying ethanol and trying to get out to 98%, 99%. And he went, give it a smell. Does it smell blue? I nearly ran out, but I held it.
Caught you out there, hasn't he? Big time. Get a sniff of pure ethanol. That'll do your job in, won't it? The one thing I will say is obviously in the making the decision to do chemical and, because we both know you only chose chemical because you can't do electrical. That's just always how it works. But obviously for you said you're going to mining, which is, well, it's such a large field of engineering that a lot of people talk to you. Obviously you see all the, what they call FIFO, which is like the fly in, fly out.
Yeah.
Work in the actual mines, but obviously your job is slightly different to that. Although a couple of weeks back you did send me a photo of you, masked up and you could barely tell it was even you. So if you want to tell us a little bit about the mining side of things, because I think I'm interested to hear about it anyway.
Yeah, got to go out to a mine just last month, and I do get to spend some time setting up different field trials and stuff, which is whereas what you hope for when you're studying, and it's really exciting stuff. But mining as an industry, the phrase I like that I heard recently was, if it's not grown, it's mined. Which, down to like the fundamentals of every process, everything requires mining, or almost everything. And there's an interesting crossover just before I get into mining between mining and net zero, because I think, not too controversial, but environmentalists, they say stop what you're doing. You should live a life without all these resources. We need to scale everything back. But what I think net zero offers when combined with mining is we're realistic and we say, well, we need everything that the mines can provide for us. So we need to figure out a way of removing those emissions rather than or reducing them and controlling them rather than just stopping. But yeah, mining, I work for a geoscience consultancy. So I didn't know many geologists when I was in uni. They're not that bad. They're sound. But I'm actually the one of the only engineers in my team because we are a consultancy. So that means working with a lot of mining engineers on site. And when I most recently went, I got to see the processing facility where they make up the concentrate, and that was really cool. 500 meter cube tank, massive tanks, massive facility. I made the mistake of wearing a jumper, and then I was dripping, feeling like I was going to pass out. Awful crew. But yeah, mining I've never really heard of. I don't know about you, Khaled. Have you really considered mining?
Oh, the thing is, with obviously being in Swansea, we've got a lot of like mines down the road and Mambos as well. So I think they sorted out one of the site visits, and it's just interesting to hear where you're coming from as well when you're saying, you're coming from a consultant background and you work with a lot of the mining engineers. But no, like obviously you're right. I think even the way you're saying about how you've got people that will sort of tell you, no, we need to take care of the planet, and then you come in, all of us as chemical engineers come in, calling big shots and just saying, nope, we're fine, we're all right, don't worry about that. So
Yeah, well, I think it's about innovating to get solutions so that we can still live in a materialistic and capitalist society. That's cool. I have an iPhone. I'm sure you boys have a phone. We all have laptops. I don't know about the electrical engineers. They seem like Samsung lawyers. At the end of the day, we are going to continue to progress AI, data centers, everything. What do you think goes into all the chips and everything? It all comes from the ground. So if we want all these luxuries, then we have to mine it. And we are capable of coming up with new solutions to handle emissions and reverse damages and do things in a more sustainable way, which is part of my role, which I enjoy. But yeah, no, I don't think I'd really out of mine. And like you said, apart from FIFO,
Yeah.
the fancy 80 nowadays.
No, I mean, neither do I, to be honest. But if you want to get paid well, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
In terms of you choosing mining, did the actual group project or your thesis for your dissertation have any bearing on why you chose that, or was it something completely different?
Yeah. So my thesis was produce 20,000 tons per year of battery grade lithium hydroxide.
Ooh.
From a brine feed though. So it's similar because it's lithium. But it was from a brine feed. So not by, I think that was the salars in, I don't know be able to say it now, but somewhere in South America. And it was interesting because it involved sort of processing, a bit of metallurgy, to obviously extract the lithium and things. And I think the key thing that your root project does is it introduces other things that are very relevant to industry. So as well as my role at the minute, I'm also involved with more of a startup side. And you'll have to do a financial evaluation as part of your um, final project, which is capital costs and operational costs.
Yeah.
And doing stuff like that, that really teaches you how to refine your process because you can't actually spend
Especially like obviously, you know, I was because we've obviously started our final year project, and people are like, "What is capex, opex?" And it's like the thing is, we can be all optimistic and all, yeah, let's spend this, just put a bypass, but then you're really looking at the P&ID and you're just there like, what the hell? This thing is like economically impossible to do, and I think what you're saying is absolutely right with the whole. It teaches you a lot more, for someone like I think myself and you will, because we're in the sort of like typical engineering route of like doing a degree and then going into industry. Some people are just clueless on, as you said, capex, opex, but it helps you. The group project helps you because, you're from ground zero. You're literally starting from nothing and then building.
Yeah, I want to talk a bit about that ground zero because you just get your question, don't you? Or your goal, your final goal, produce 20,000 tons of battery grade lithium hydroxide. And knowing what the first steps to take on that is quite daunting.
Yeah.
So
It will be a hell of a project. It will be very long. And
to jump in a sec. So for mine and Josh's benefit, what is capex and opex? Because I have no idea.
okay, nice. Yeah. And capex is your capital expenditure. OPEX is your operational expenditure. Don't worry, you haven't signed on to a financial podcast. We're not going to start MPVs. The MPV is also unit present value. There's all these different parts, and I think this leads me more onto the topic of like when you enter industry,
Yeah.
you know your fundamentals, especially through the routes. Me and Gala did. I know Reese, Josh, you will have more experience of like physical projects, which is good. Like I say, we did pilots, but it's not the same.
Yeah.
When you enter, you've got your fundamentals. You know all about fluid dynamics, thermodynamics, if you're a chemical engineer, separation processes, and it's all important. But ultimately, a project is made up of many different things, and you have to communicate with all the stakeholders.
Yeah.
One thing we do as part of our the project I'm on now, we look at what you call a life cycle assessment and also techno-economic assessment, which looks at the costs of different projects. And if we have two approaches and one is cheaper, then in some ways that way's better. So understanding the why for the industry, especially when you're a consultancy and working with a client, understanding the why in terms of why do they want to do this and what are the stakeholders looking to get out of this project.
Yeah.
And that's where you got to think about different things, whether it's financial or it might be social, sustainability development goals. It might just be what's simpler to manage. It might be more expensive, but simpler for guys on site to manage. Something different.
I think one thing I was going to ask you as well was like for people like myself and any of the other listeners, obviously, you've got that, you're working on some projects right now. What's the sort of like rule of thumb or like a tip that you go by every time that could be applied in uni as well?
Yeah.
Whether it's for people like ourselves that are in chem eng, whether it's for people like Josh as well, just like you, because I feel like one thing that I've noticed so far is just having milestones achievable in X amount of weeks, X amount like that. The key organization is the sort of thing that I would think. What would you think then?
Now you're spot on, and like taking project management into industry is going to allow you to manage projects and get ahead. When there's a little team, even if there's a designated project manager, if you could show the ability to help set those milestones, implement them and meet them, that's going to lead you into a leadership role, which I think most aspiring engineers would aim for.
Yeah.
Well, in terms of a little tip, I'm going to give a bit more of a technical one. Not too technical, but whenever you come to a process, and I think that this is a good one because it applies across any engineering industry. First, you must define the boundaries and what the inflows, outflows are. It's simple and it sounds really technical, but you got to break your process down to fundamentals. What are you measuring? Why? What are you trying to produce? Why? And just fit it all in the box. If that makes sense, like a PNID, like a process flow diagram.
Yeah.
Because I've worked with some nature-based solutions, a more open system of things, you've not got piping and instrumentation. So you can set up the same approach. Look at your flow diagram box and take it back to fundamentals. What are you measuring and why?
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that we obviously spoke about before this was consultancy versus industry. Now, for me, that is probably different to what it is for you. So do you want to dive into that a little bit as to why you've chosen consultancy over industry itself?
Yeah. I'd like to hear the opposite as well, like what value industry brings. Because like I say, this is the only role I've had, so I don't actually have a comparison, or the only role I've had since graduating. But so consultancy, I think you get more access. And what I mean by that is you're going to work with different clients. They're going to have different situations. So you get to experience more projects. A downside to that is you don't always get to see a project through.
Yeah.
So I know like probably quite a lot of you guys, once you start something, you kind of want to see it. You want to see it work. You want to fix it yourself. That's not really consultancy. You suggest things and you might deliver them, or they might cancel the project, or they might change the project. So it's a very dynamic environment. But one thing I think I mentioned before about being a full package, and someone once described that to me as being a T shape. But if you think about a T,
Yeah.
it's very broad across the top.
Yeah.
And then it's got one area of expertise. So I quite like that. So in a consultancy, you get to work across different areas, different projects.
Yeah.
Broadened your experience. So you still have areas of expertise, but you broaden. And I think that actually builds into career development as well, because another saying or analogy someone gave me was that your pyramid can only go as high as your base. So you need to have different experiences, again, length across the bottom, because if you're only too wide at the bottom, you can only go one up. Whereas obviously you increase the more you build your base. So that's why I like consultancy. I think it offers a wider experience. And I like that the networking, the talking to clients, the presenting, because mine's R&D, or I'm R&D focused.
Yeah.
So you get to research, develop something, and then you get to share it with everyone. Yeah. Don't copy it.
Yeah. I mean, from my perspective, the flip side of that is the one thing that I will say is obviously consultancy is a bit like working for what I would call a smaller business.
Yeah.
So when I've worked for previously larger businesses, you sort of, as you say, you would just focus on one thing, you make one part. Generally, it's the same part because they will do repeat projects. But for me, and as anyone that aspires to be an engineer, I think we are always looking for that next sort of problem to solve. You don't want to keep doing the same thing day in, day out. And, it works for some people, and there's a lot of people that get paid a lot of money to do the same thing day in, day out. But when I moved away from the large corporate structure into the smaller businesses, you go from just being an electrical engineer to then being a project manager. You got to start costing everything up, making sure that everything's as it should be. The cost doesn't go over the budget of the project. You've also got to manage, things as well as the mechanical guys. Like if you've got people working with you, you've got to make sure that they're doing what they need to be doing at all times. And not only that is that, as I've done many a time, is that you don't double order stuff, because you can find that a lot of the projects will, cross over each other. And that means that people will think about other stuff that you will think about at the same time. So then you have two bills of materials that are different, but they'll have some parts that are the same. And you want to make sure that you don't end up spending silly money on something that, has already been ordered. The flip side of what you said as well is that you don't usually or very commonly see the end of a project. The one thing that, well, I know I do, and definitely Josh will as he, gets more into the industry, is that you get to see the project through, but you also get to see where it goes wrong. You have to fix that problem, and you have to take responsibility for anything that goes wrong going forward, because there were people you sold the item to, or the machine or whatever it is to, will come back to you, and it's on your head. So in the sense that consultancy may be good in that, don't get me wrong, you don't get to the end of it, but then also you've only suggested a solution, you've not implemented.
Yeah, we're in a fortunate position there, because if I do make a mistake at work and it gets caught, I can just pull it. Oh, I'm an apprentice, but I'm a supervisor. Nah, not me. I'm just a new guy.
But the one thing I would say as well, it's just crept up when we're talking about more apprentices and an industry. In a consultancy, there's a lot more writing, there's a lot more reports, and there's less. Not always, but certainly in my role, there's less like hands-on stuff. I do set up some trials, I run some pilots, but there's a lot of report writing. So and data and everything, but you look at the data, you don't go change stuff in, you write about it and suggest what they can change.
I think what you could also definitely say, because from what I've heard, because I just finished my placement not too long ago. Apparently, consultancy is very long hours. You're catering. It can get a bit annoying because you're catering to the client specifically. Obviously, when we were at once, sorry,
There's deadlines, which wouldn't like deadlines, but they do creep up, especially when you have multiple clients. I think the right answer is, and I don't know the right answers, I'm only a few years into industry. What I think is you should either work for a consultancy or industry to begin with, depending what you think sounds better. But then you should change, and you should allow yourself the time to work in the other side, on the other side. Go work at big industry, maybe climb your way up a bit, and then why don't you try and work at a startup as well? I think you should work across everything, or at least that's sort of where I think you get the most experience.
Yeah, I have something like that when it comes to traveling, stuff like that. When it comes to access to projects and general experience. In fact, very quick side note, actually, what you were talking about, built up as the metaphorical pyramid of that, you can only build up higher if you broaden your base. Broaden your base. Reese, that would actually make a very good title for the episode, a metaphor about a pyramid or something about broadening base. Yeah, that's what I'm going to use. I was saying that'll be good. But yeah, a great opportunity that I get in my apprenticeship is actually travel. Because I think I'm either going to be shipped off to parts of Europe for commissioning big projects for parts of installation, but also I'll spend some time at the American base as well, and so I'll end up probably doing some construction systems with the American system, which as Reese will know, the electrics do not work the same there. They're quite radically different.
No neutrals.
No, that's very decent. Definitely getting exposure to go traveling. I mean, I've been quite fortunate. I'd say most of the traveling I've done, there's both you go to meet clients on site, and that can be international. But we also, at the company I am at, we do a lot of international conferences. And you're right, getting to fly anywhere for work is pretty exciting, especially when we're young. We want to go see different places. And normally, especially if it's a conference, there's normally some drinks in the evening or whatever.
it's really good. What's the second place then? What's the sickest place you've been in with work?
Ooh, I mean, site visit, Northern Europe, crazy, lots of reindeers. But conference, I got to go to Canada. I've been to Canada twice, and I went to Vancouver, and Vancouver was very cool. I think it was an 11-hour flight or 9-hour time difference.
God, how you
Presented them this morning.
what you kind of see would do that, mate?
Yeah, but it's awesome. Just even going places, and we talk a lot, or through the engineering compass, it's discussed a lot about networking.
Yeah.
Once you're into industry and you attended events, so I would recommend attending events, even as like a young professional, undergraduate or whatever. You should get yourself to events. Some of them are free, and handpick them. If you're members of institutes as well, they got an event. But being in a room full of people who are there literally to talk to other people, then there's no better and easier place to network. It does take a bit of skill training, but eventually, you'll be comfortable.
Yeah, I will say though, in those situations, you can obviously do, as you say, skill training beforehand, but just throwing yourselves in those situations where it's a bit like, oh, it is the deep end. But generally, at those sorts of conferences, people will talk to you, and they like the sort of questions that you bring to the table. Because the one thing that I was always afraid of is asking essentially what's a stupid question. But obviously, when you're new to something, it's not stupid to you because you don't know. There's no right or wrong answer that comes from it. So I think, as you say, Will, it's a really good thing to do if you have the opportunity. I mean, obviously, Josh recently, which one did you go to, Josh?
The PPMA Total Show.
PPMA Total Show. Obviously, that's quite a big one. There's things like Automate Best. I went to Automate UK. There's the one at the end of this month as well. Can't remember what it's called now. Slipped my mind now, but
It's an industry you're interested in, though. You just need to get yourself to some of those events. I understand if you're a student and there's a price attached, then it might be,
of course, it's a bit more difficult.
best use of your money. But there's also online events that are often free and other things. So definitely doing that. And I think, like you just said, there's like almost a perceived risk of if you're at your first event or you want to ask a question but you don't know. There's a perceived risk, but in reality, no one in that room is going to laugh at you for asking a question or turn you down when you introduce yourself. It's not that environment. I know we all think and catastrophize, but
Yeah, of course. Well, as we've sort of spoken a lot about that, I'm going to ask you what your, I'd say most proud engineering story is. What is something that you've done that you can, when you tell people what you do, what is the following story that comes along with? Explain, yeah, you.
I mean, I like to set the scene when I tell people about mine and my most recent visit. Do you want to guess how much material they dig out of the ground per year in tons?
Go on, 20,000. Go on.
More, I said a million. Oh, go on, Josh.
It's 500,000.
40 million.
And so,
Yeah.
Billion tons come out of the ground every year to be processed. It's a lot. It's a lot. So I like to set the scale and to be able to go to that mine and see the scale and stand at the bottom of a pit, 300 meters below. Very cool. And in terms of achievements, that was to set up a large scale field trial that I've been involved in from conception. It was I was mostly responsible for the design, and then to commission something like that is a big achievement. And actually, when it was the first day of setting it up, and we sort of stood around, we have a pit, and we were setting up a test cell, quite a big pit, 50 meters cubed. And the guys from the mine are there, the mining engineers, the contractors are there. You stood around, I'm with a few of my colleagues, and they go, all right, so what we do? And they just sort of turn and look at you, and you're like, oh yeah, I know what we're doing. And you just reel it off, and then a few days later, the thing's built, everything's installed, and it's working. That's a good feeling.
See, part of me thinks you're lying because nothing is ever built, installed, and immediately works. Nothing ever works first time.
Okay, so you're fine.
Well, we'll end this out with one question. So, obviously, as you grow as a chemical engineer, could you give us one tip to a young aspiring chemical engineer that they could use daily or in career search?
Daily. What needs daily? I think it's about having the right mindset and going from fundamentals. So I'd say like use your imagination.
But thinking about processes is probably the cringiest one you could get.
Actually agree though. Cause like
I was just gonna say, I think everyone would laugh when I say this.
with our group project now, and we're doing production of isopropanol. I wish I was lying to tell you that we are planning to use potato skin as our starch source. So it's like
You'd be surprised. You go on a deeper level in chemical engineering, especially. You know, we're talking about combining different elements and things to make products, and that's what always like fascinated me about it. Whether it's shampoo or a phone or whatever, it's all a combination of different like elements, and you require chemical engineers, and in the case of phones, electrical engineers, to put it together, or in the case of both. So that's what I think. I think whenever you're involved in a project, you can focus, use your imagination, and then use your engineering skills to build that project.
Happy days, everybody. Well, thank you everyone for your time. And I'm sure you'll see more of Will's face going forward. But I think that's a pod, boys.